Good day everyone, it is Caitlin, and today we are talking about how I defarbed or made period correct an old costume skirt into an 1850s and 60s skirt. Alright, welcome to the couch. So this is a very random how-to video I was not planning to do, but I was doing it anyway and realized that it's probably a good talking point. So let's go ahead and do this. So I have here what was originally, I think, there's Stella. She's dealing with a little bit of an upper respiratory issue that is almost better, but every once in a while you'll hear her breathing still. So yeah, she's hanging out in my lap. Also, she likes to eat zippers, we found out. Anyway, this was originally a costume I made when I was a teenager. It was actually my very first costume I made all by myself, as in my mom did not read me the directions. She did not pin anything for me. I did the entire thing myself. Actually, all things considered, now that I put that together, it actually turned out pretty decently. But yeah, I was like younger, teenage-ish years, in high school, or middle school, something like that. And it was a medieval-ish, actually like a Tudor-ish costume. It was not accurate, okay? Anyway, I have here what was the underskirt, and I just happened to be going through, and a couple months ago I was going through my mom's attic, looking through old costumes and stuff to kind of clear out the costuming bit, and I found this. And I took one look at it and went, hey, that's a period appropriate fabric. This is cotton velvet. That's a really good period fabric. I bet I could do something with that. So I took the thing home. I left the rest of the costume there. But I took the period appropriate stuff home with me, and I'm trying to make it into a skirt, an early 1850s skirt that I can wear with a wool basque that I have that's black that would just go with anything. Because in the 50s we can have contrasting top and bottom like that with the basque. So here we are talking about how to remake a skirt. So I've already kind of done this a little bit as in taking part of it apart, but kind of just explain what I'm doing here. So the top, which is gathered double machine gathered like you would do with modern stuff. In a self fabric waistband, which was very, very bulky because it's a self fabric waistband. And there was a zipper up the center back, which I have now taken off, and Stella has decided to kill it, which is good because we don't like zippers, do we, Stella? You kill it dead. You kill it dead, you hear me? You get that zipper. We don't do zippers in this house, you're right. You're a good girl. So the self fabric hem, about 2-inch hem. That, I took part of it apart. Let me see if I can find, there it is. Little 1/4 inch there, so probably 2 1/4 inch hem. I have one seam up here. It's a 2-panel skirt. Each panel is a little over 60 inches wide. It's going to make a very narrow 1850 skirt, but I think we can do it. What are you fascinated with? You like the camera? You're just staring at it. Yeah, okay. I have a French seam on this side. And the other seam is serged. Both not appropriate seaming techniques in the 19th century. So as far as making this into an 1850 skirt, it is going to be on the narrow side. You'll see skirt starting at about 130 inches wide, going up to 180-ish. But this is what I have, and it's close enough because it's going to end up being 125 inches that I think I can swing it with just a few petticoats. And it's a very full, thick fabric, so I think it's going to work. So as far as making this into a period appropriate thing, because I would never wear this the way it was, with a zipper, with the self fabric waistband, with the double machine gathering, with the French seam, with the serging. None of that's appropriate with a hem like that. I mean, the hem like that isn't terrible, but it's not ideal. So we're going to change this and make this into a period appropriate ensemble. The very first thing you need to check if you're making something period appropriate is the fabric correct? Mine happens to be, because it's a cotton velvet, which is around. You can do that. It's in a period appropriate color, this really dark hunter green. That's all fine. If you're working with fabric that's not correct, you're never going to get something that is correct. So whatever you are remaking, just make sure it's the right fabric and make sure you have enough fabric, and then you can tweak it and make it into something that is good. So I have taken out the zipper, the dreaded zipper. This is going in the trash now because I don't use zippers, even in modern stuff. I just don't like putting them in. Somehow I put that one in pretty well when I was a teenager, but I can't do it anymore, so whatever. I have taken out the top part, which is somewhere, meaning that I have taken out all the gathering bits that don't need to be in there. We'll do that by hand in a little bit. We might actually pleat it. I'm going to go back and look at some original velvet just to see if it was more common to pleat it or to gather it. But I am going to need to iron this. Ironing velvet can be a little bit interesting. I'll need to put cushion down, and I'll iron it from the back with another cushion. But I do need to get some of these wrinkles out. But what I am doing now is taking out this dreaded French seam, which I've actually nearly done, and there's a spot there. I'm sure that'll come out. And then when I get to that point, then we can go over here, because there's French seam is 2 seams, and then just hopefully get this whole thing just on that side taken apart, and we can go to the other side and take apart all this lovely serging, which would have been my mom's serger, because I don't own one of those things. It was really nice to be able to use it when I could, though. I actually kind of like serging. Unfortunately, it is not a period-appropriate technique for any of the 19th century, I don't think. I don't actually know when sergers were invented. But I know for all my time periods, they're not right. So no matter how easy they are, not okay. So depending on your project, you may not have to take yours down to the base. You may have done, let's say, a period correct seaming where you just seamed it up and didn't finish the edges. That's perfectly fine for mid-century. So in that case, I wouldn't have to take out the side seams. I would just have to, redo the waistline at that point, because technically the hem was right. I just don't think it's the right height for me with a lot of petticoats on. So I want to take that out anyway. And also because in the mid-century we tend to fold this edge under a little bit, this top edge, and I was hoping that if I took out those 2 inches, that would give me a little bit of a turnover. We shall see if that is going to work or not. So at this point, with the hem taken out, at least partially, it's not completely taken out yet, but it's mostly there. With the hem taken out and the waist taken out and the sides taken out, I shall have 2 rectangles of fabric, which are going to get sewn back together in a moment, and then we shall rehem it, refinish the edges, and redo the waistband. Here comes the kitten. Which seems counterintuitive to do the whole thing over again, but this way I can be confident that it is right. I am one of those crazy people who, when people ask, oh, what makes your skirt stand out? I just lift everything up and show them, which may not be the most ladylike thing to do, but it sure is educational. So I am very particular about the inside of my things, making sure that they are put in correctly and done right. Also, the seam's going to lay better now because a French seam is very bulky. A serge seam is very bulky. And period seam finishes aren't bulky. So this is going to lay differently now that I have fixed the 2 problems. And of course, the machine gathering at the waistband, that doesn't look like anything, period. So that had to be redone. The zipper isn't period. It had to be redone. The only thing that didn't have to be redone was the hem, but I want that extra couple of inches. So that need to be done for height reasons. Although I haven't grown since I've made this, I don't think. So in theory, it should be right about the right length, unless I made this a little bit short. But we're going to find out. So I'm going to finish taking this apart, and I'll see you when there are 2 rectangles. Alright, back in the sewing room to put the seam back together. So I was wrong. This is not 2 60-inch panels. It's 3 panels of, I didn't even measure how wide they are. But it is measured out to be about 125 inches, which again is slightly narrow, but still workable for the late 40s, early 50s range. So it's also going to be a little tight height-wise. I like my skirts 41 inches. This fabric is exactly 41.5 inches. So I have a 1/2 inch for turnover and really nothing at the top. Now granted that 41.5 is the back, so I'll have a little bit to turn over in the front. I think it's 40 inches in the front that I usually do. So I have an inch turn in the front and none in the back. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to deal with that in just a minute. And so what we're going to do now is go ahead and sew these panels back together. Now one of these panels is going to be left open slightly because again we need a back opening for this gown. Actually, I don't know if I want a back opening. I think I want a side front opening. Let me look because I need to decide how I want this to open. It's probably just as easy to have it open up the back. I still haven't decided. Think about where the pockets are going to sit. I think the pockets will sit better if it's opening from the back. I sound real confident, don't I? Because I mean, the center back opening and then either side will have a seam. But I could just have it open on the side, have it open, have a seam down the back, and still have my pocket here. Let's go ahead and do a side front opening. Those are starting to become more common in this time period. They're easier to get into. Let's go ahead and plan for that. And it won't matter quite yet. And I am now seeing why I felt the need back 15 years ago or whenever I made this gown. Okay, it probably wasn't 15. You know, it probably was 15 years ago. When I made this gown, why I did the finishing of the edges. Well, A, because that's what I was taught to do, but B, it is raveling. So we are going to have to finish these edges. The best way on a thick fabric like this is going to be overcasting the edges. It's going to need to be done by hand to make it period appropriate, but that's fine. So let's go ahead and make this one the opening. About an inch will turn under. So I just need it to be about that much. There's a measurement that you need to use for this, but I kind of have it eyeballed now. Basically, it's whatever your waist measurement is, because that's what your waist is, minus, you subtract that from your hip measurement, or if you're somebody who dresses from the top, your shoulder measurement. Basically, the widest part of your body measurement, and you get a number. You subtract that in half, and that plus a little bit of ease, say 2 inches, is what you need your placket to be. Because when you open this up, that should be your number plus a little bit. Because you don't want, if your hips are 40 inches wide, mine are not, let's just say they are. Let's just say, in theory, 40 inches wide, and your waist is 30 inches. Well, if you don't have any placket, you can't get this skirt over your hips. It'll be 10 inches too small to get over your hips. So what you need to do is take that extra 10 inches from the, so taking the 40, subtracting the 30, you get 10. And you subtract that, you divide that in half, you get 5. That means you need a 5-inch placket. So 5 inches of not seamed. But you don't want it exactly to be 40 inches when opened up, because that's going to be a really tight fit. You need a good bit of ease, 2, 3, 4 inches, somewhere in there. But this is what usually works for me. Yes, dressmaking does require a fair bit of math. No, it is not scary math. I don't think it's scary enough. But there's not much of a turnover, so I can go ahead and maybe this far down to start the pocket. Go ahead and put the pin in here, get the top part done. And I'll go search through my stash because I'm 95% sure I put an extra pocket in there somewhere. Found one. It's not the lining fabric I'm going to use for the rest of it, but that is okay. This is the 19th century. We don't care about what we don't see. This one happens to be modeled directly off an original in my own collection as far as a dress pocket, and it has a seam in it because I ran out of fabric. That's not part of the original, but it's part of my reproduction because I did not have enough fabric. And it's a period technique because they reuse fabric all the time. And how I put in pockets is not necessarily the best way to put in pockets, but it's what makes sense to me. Actually, we're going to have to do this in a minute. I'm just going to measure how much I need to leave open. Roughly here. And in my little sewing world that I've created, pins going this way means I keep going, pins going this way means I stop. At this point, we're just making a regular dress. We took the dress apart, or we took the skirt apart to its base layer, which is rectangles, which is what they would have cut, and now we're just seaming it back together, but doing it in a period appropriate manner. So I'm going to use a straight seam on this. This is late 1840s, early 1850s, perfectly appropriate to do by machine, which I'm going to do. People I usually portray bought a sewing machine in 1847, so I don't foresee doing anything earlier than that, so we're going to go with that. Machines seem to be, I live in Texas. I can document that machines were advertised, or sewing machines were advertised for sale in Texas by 1845. So that's kind of my cutoff here. Sometimes it's 1847, sometimes it's 1845. That 1845 to 1847 range is my, sometimes a hand sew it, sometimes a machine sew it era. But everything post 1847 for sure gets machine sewn. So I'm going to sew this by machine, all 3 seams. And we'll come back, we'll put a pocket in, and then we'll be well on our way to having a skirt. Seam sewn, we're going to go ahead and put this pocket in. So I'm going to sew that seam real quick, and then we'll sew up the next seam on the other side, like this, to form my little pocket. A nice big pocket. Not as large as I've seen, at least not as long as I've seen, but certainly fairly wide. Alright, pocket is completely in. We're going to overcast some edges. I'm actually going to even this up a little bit. I didn't sew them completely even. It's easier when if you're overcast when they're even. Just going to make sure both seams are exactly into the exact same place. Let's start there. How close the stitches go is really up to you. How much do you think it's going to ravel? I'm not terribly concerned about it. So I did make kind of a smaller seam allowance, kind of squeak every inch I could out of this skirt circumference. I'm going to actually, I want to make sure this doesn't ravel on me. Now this is a nice dress, it's not going to get washed. Nice dresses don't get washed, they get spot cleaned. So I don't have to worry about the washing machine or period laundering tactics or anything messing with it. It's going to stay very nice. I only have to be worried about wear. And my basic rule of philosophy, if I'm not going to wash the dress, if the basic movement and pulling and messing with of sewing doesn't cause the fabric to ravel, then it's most likely not going to ravel when you're wearing it. If it is, that's when I overcast. Nice little overcast seam. No, it does not look perfect. No, it doesn't look great, but it is overcast. It's not going to ravel nearly as much. Alright, now we are working on the waistline. So because this dress was so short, what I've opted to do is add a little extra piece of just brown cotton. And that way in the back, where the skirt is exactly the length I need, I just folded over exactly where that hemline is. You don't see the brown from the front at all. But in the front, where I need it a bit shorter, so I don't trip, the velvet comes through a little bit. So there's the front side, there's the back side. And this is called balancing the skirt. You do this with any reproduction skirt that you're doing, any 19th century dress, at least in the first half, needs to be balanced. And that is just what I'm doing. And now I can do normal waist treatment stuff. I'm going to gauge this. And so I'm going to go do my gauging stitches real quick all the way around. We can attach it to a waistband in a second. So at this point we're just making a typical skirt. That's all we're doing. On the hem, I have attached the facing, which is kind of like what we did before. And it's just all attached at the very bottom. And I'm going to just sew that by hand. You don't want to do this by machine because if your facing gets caught on something, you're going to rip out your fabric before you rip out your stitching because machine stitching is very strong. And so if you do it by machine, you're more likely to rip out the entire skirt and have unusable fabric basically. Well, not unusable. You have to make it something other than a dress. So it would have to be like a kid's dress or something. But if you do it by hand, then your stitching will rip and all you have to do is restitch it up instead of having to find a whole new dress.
Alright, for some reason I don't have any more footage after this, but basically I just did what I said. I gauged it, attached it to a brown waistband instead of a self fabric waistband. You can kind of see it poking through the belt in the dress I was wearing at a Lusty this last February. But generally you don't see it, especially with the belt. I ended up wearing it with an 1860s dress because I wasn't bringing any hoops, and all my 1860s dresses have hoops, so I had to wear an 1860s bodice with the 1850s skirt, and it was a mess, but I didn't have room to bring hoops with me, so I had to improvise. But generally, yes, I do wear this with the black basque I spoke about earlier. But yes, so that is what the skirt looks like. It can be worn, it's great, and it's been used a couple of times already, so it's becoming a staple part of the winter wardrobe, especially because it's so nice and heavy and warm. And with that wool basque from the 50s, it makes a absolutely perfect 1850s ensemble. And sometimes I pair it with like a red hairnet so that it has like red and green. It looks like Christmassy almost. So it's a great winter dress. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me today as we talked about defarbing, which is a reenactor term. It just means, Farby means incorrect or not very correct or something like that. So defarbing is making something that was not correct again. So I defarbed this skirt. But thank you so much for joining me today as we defarbed this skirt. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. Comment down below if you ever done this with one of your skirts. Took something that was not very correct and made it to be a more correct historical outfit. As always, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here in the next video.